Welcome back to another episode of the Heatio Home Energy Show. And today I have upgraded my co-guest from my business partner, Thomas Farquhar, to another Farquhar. I didn't actually think I'd ever find another Farquhar. I hoped I'd never find another Farquhar, but I've certainly managed to pick one out.
Best thing comes in two, don't they?
And we have Andy Farquhar from Ideal Heating.
Thanks for having me.
And the king of heat pumps in the world of Ideal. I was even just asking them what your job title was, and it was basically heat pump.
Yeah, I think king's a bit of a strong word. I think after the Farquhar joke, people often go Lord, but go a different way. So Ideal, I'm senior product manager, and my team look after heat pumps, heat pump hot water cylinders, heat pump thermostats, heat pumps.
Heat pumps.
In fact, in my interview, I just had to say heat pumps, heat pumps, heat pumps.
And were you heat pumps before, or did you become?
So I've been in the heat pump industry since, I guess, 2010, or maybe a little bit earlier than that, but probably in earnest in 2010, and started out at a small renewable energy company. So we really got going on ground source heat pumps, and that's where we learn our trade, and then. I was there for quite some time and then moved across to a heat pump manufacturer, and then Ideal picked me up in 2020. In fact, I got employed by Ideal and then furloughed 3 weeks after. So, yeah.
Nice start to the employment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you Hull based? Because I know at Ideal, they've got a big plant there over in Hull.
Yeah, so Ideal are part of a bigger company called Group Atlantic, and we are based, our headquarters is Hull. So Sea of Culture, and we.
Did you take that off us? I'm sure it was Liverpool. At some point.
I think you guys got the proper Sea of Culture.
European City of Culture.
Yeah, European, and then they made Sea of Culture Light. And Hull picked that up.
Maybe it was exchanged, because I think when Hull went down as well in the Premier League, we picked up Andy Robertson, and that was probably one of Jurgen Klopp's best deals of his life.
Absolutely. Yeah, no one thanks Hull for that either.
A nice £8 million spend on probably the best left back in the world.
One of them.
Not bitter about that. You guys
I was going to say. Yeah, one of them. Yeah, I'm actually a Queen's Park Rangers fan.
Oh, right.
So I grew up in West London. So I managed to choose the team which was worse than Hull City. So well done. Hull are based out of, I live just outside of Hull, and our Ideal are based in Hull itself. But we also have factories around the country. So we have factories over in Blackpool. You'll recognise the Gled Hill brand.
Oh, yeah.
So we Gled Hill is part of the family as well. We are around the country.
Owned by the same group? But
So in 2015, Ideal was bought, as was Gled Hill actually, bought by a family company called Group Atlantic. And they're based out of France. They just happen to be one of the leading heat pump manufacturers in Europe. I think they were number one. I think we just got pipped. We're number two now. But in France, which is the biggest heat pump or the fastest adopters of heat pumps, we're number one in France. So we make the most heat pumps for that market. And I think at the time, I don't know if they had a crystal ball, but they were looking at companies in the UK, and they picked Ideal up, which has been, it's been great since they've taken us on, because they're a family firm. We don't have any, we're owned by a family. So a lot of the money that gets made within the business gets put back into the business, which is really good for us.
Really good. And we are, I was going to say we're like big fans of heat pumps on this show. I think we need to start thinking about maybe renaming the show, because we are the Home Energy Show. We're meant to talk about all things to do with saving money in on your energy bills and helping customers save money in their homes. But there's so much going on around heat pumps at the moment that this topic seems to keep on coming up. So for anybody that is new to the show, can you talk through just the high level, what is a heat pump?
Yeah, so if I track this back, Ideal Heating don't just make heat pumps, and hopefully those who've listened or are listening to the show will be aware of our boilers. We make a lot of boilers. In fact, we make the most popular boiler in the UK at the moment. We just made number one. So we make a lot of boilers, and that's really where the business has come from. Obviously, Group Atlantic are a heat pump manufacturer, but Ideal are predominantly a boiler manufacturer. And then about 3-4 years ago, we started to bring heat pumps over to the UK. And our plan is 2025 to start manufacturing in the UK. I guess heat pumps, for those who aren't familiar, At the moment, we have wet heating systems in our house, and our wet heating systems, predominantly in the UK, we have the most homogenous heating systems of any country, probably in Europe, if not the world. But we have more boilers in the UK, and the benefits of having natural gas over the last decades have meant the way we heat our homes traditionally is with gas boilers. As we look to reduce the carbon emissions in our properties, the government's really encouraging everyone to adopt new ways of heating our radiators or underfloor. And so heat pumps is a way that in Europe and actually around the world, but they've been using heat pumps to heat their homes. And so what we then have is an outdoor unit, which is like a fan unit. And all that does is generate heat, just like a gas boiler. And that transfers that heat to our heating systems, so our radiators, to our hot water cylinders. And in many ways, that's the difference. From a comfort level, your house still gets really warm, too warm if you want it to be. And your hot water is still really hot, too hot if you want it to be. But rather than using natural gas to heat our boilers, to heat our homes, we're now using electric heat pumps.
So it's essentially we're burning electric, using electric, consuming electric to create the heat.
Really great point, actually. On our heat pump thermostat, we did loads of work with consumers on whether we should replace the flame as the on symbol. And everyone said you need to keep the flame.
Yeah,
no one wants a fan or an electric bolt or a compressor there in heat pumps. So we are, in essence, they are boilers, but outside they're not boilers. They're fan units with a refrigerant cycle inside. And that helps us generate useful heat from the air in the outside atmosphere.
And the reason why this topic keeps coming up on the show, and why we keep getting guests on that are in that space, the biggest driver here is that as it stands at the moment, we're 80%, I think, of our homes are on natural gas boilers. 80% of those gas boilers are combi boilers. So we've got a huge reliance on natural gas. And then you've got all these countries around Europe, and especially when you look at the Scandinavian countries, where they've already made a big transition away to electrifying their heating systems, electrifying their homes. And I think the big thing that stands out at the moment is that we were exposed to this energy crisis that's going on now. I mean, we're in a position now where we're buying gas from Norway, because they took all their homes off gas to isolate themselves from energy crisis like this in the world. So some of maybe the less educated people in the heat pump space, or the people that are definitely against having heat pumps in people's homes, the naysayers, if you like, will say, well, they don't work. They're not going to get your home hot enough. We know that's not true.
Well, I mean, Group Atlantic is a great example. The heat pump manufacturer bought the boiler manufacturer. So, I mean, in essence, we know, I think the question of whether heat pumps work in UK homes or any homes, I think hopefully we've got past that. And my experience back in 2010 was we used to fit heat pumps on stately homes. So they would have massive heat loss. But going back to that, I think it's a really great point. And actually, I think we need to highlight that Northern Europe actually was already electrified. A lot of Northern Europe didn't have natural gas, or at least they didn't have an extensive grid that we have. So actually they were already running electric heating systems. And when you've got an electric heating system, heat pumps make loads of sense, because they're can be up to 500% more efficient. So every kilowatt you take in from the grid, you're able to generate 5 kilowatts of energy for the home. So it makes sense. It's a way of reducing your energy costs, but also having a nicer comfort level than you might do with traditional panel rads. So from, I think, a lot of Europe, and it's the same with France, while they have gas, they have a massive electric infrastructure there, probably not dissimilar to our gas infrastructure here. And so for them, the transition from electric panel rads to electric heat pumps was really easy.
Easy in terms of the supply, you're swapping out an electric storage heaters, for instance. But I would guess the infrastructure you mentioned, we've predominantly got these wet systems in our homes, wet radiator systems in our homes. Whereas if they're on panel rads, running that retrospectively in an existing property can be a challenge in itself. But I think if this maybe the element of naivety or reluctance from a political perspective, maybe to do anything to really start to turn that dial to shift the UK way. It's taken, we've got the war in Ukraine now, we've got everything that's going on in the Red Sea as well. I think that, these are all going to add to this problem and how long we're going to be in this situation for. And I don't think we're going to see gas prices come down.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. I mean, on that point, France, for instance, where we obviously have a significant proportion of the heat pump market there. I think back in 2005, they started to incentivize heat pumps. And that would be through grants or tax breaks. And they've continued to do that. And as they've done that, we've seen a massive increase in heat pump adoption because of exactly. So when I say it's easier because you're used to electricity. But actually still the capital outlay was expensive. And it took state support to really encourage that through. Yeah. And I think that's as well as through the energy providers. I think for us, I don't think we should be ashamed of our gas in the UK. And you think actually what natural gas replaced was oil and coal. Yeah. You look at America now and they're moving from oil and coal to methane. And I guess we're one step ahead of them. But because we've had gas, we've used it. And I don't know if we've used it well, that's not for me to say, but we've used it and it's been a really good way of heating our homes. But the carbon cost of that, obviously we're now starting to recognise and realise. And so as we move to heat pumps, I guess now in parallel with gas boilers and then eventually to replace them, we start to see how we can really reduce a significant amount of carbon that we're producing as a country. And I guess potentially the main reason we haven't moved maybe as quickly as the Northern Europeans or the Europeans is probably because of that combination of the end user receiving a real benefit from it, or the homeowner, as well as government incentives.
I think, there's that combination. But we've seen some really interesting data coming through from customers who have started to make this transition from they've gone solar first, then they've gone solar and battery, then they've gone solar battery, and then they put a heat pump on,
right.
And then they'll tap into some of these more innovative and flexible tariffs.
Yeah.
And I think that's where sometimes where you hear the negativity around heat pumps, they just talk about a heat pump in isolation, direct replacement for a gas boiler. So we can knock the conversation on the head around them not working in people's homes.
We know they're great. Work. Everyone's warm enough. The hot water's always fine.
They've got the capabilities now of outputting higher temperatures. And so we know they work in the home. Yeah. We know we can retrofit them into homes practically. And then there's this the final case around, but it's going to cost you a fortune to run. But actually, when you combine them with these innovative and flexible tariffs that come along, we're actually starting to see people like Mick Wall, who's one of the guests on the show. Yeah, he actually released his 2023 stats, and I think he was running average over the year. He was running like 10 pence a kilowatt hour for his electric, with the benefits of like things like the solar export guarantee, the really low rates of electricity with his maybe some of the high rates. So his blended point was closer to the pence per kilowatt hour of gas over the year, and he's got like I say heat pump, battery, and storage and solar. So I think actually when you start getting into that world, if more people have those systems, and one of the big drivers behind people doing this, why not just stick another boiler in? Yeah, as you say, the carbon point is a big one. Yeah, but as a nation, we need to decarbonize our energy systems, but we also need to electrify our homes. Yeah, because then we are more in control of what we use. We do get that energy security as well.
I completely agree. I think we obviously we are technology agnostic in some ways, but we know that boilers, hot water cylinders, and heat pumps work really well at Ideal, and that's where we see mass market adoption across all our markets. But actually, going back to how I heat my home, what we've seen a massive in the able to pay market. We've actually seen because of electric vehicles and the tax benefits of that, people are starting to calculate how much energy they can save when they charge their car. And so it starts to take control of how much energy their car costs to run. And I think as soon as you look at that and then you bring a heat pump in, you go, oh, actually, I can do the same thing with my heating system with a heat pump, then maybe to a greater degree that I could do with my gas boiler. And then when you add PV, and if you've got the capital to add batteries as well, you start to see absolute benefits as you take the energy your house uses from a holistic perspective, rather than just kind of a individual. I'm going to heat my radiators with that. I'm going to use that to charge my, microwave or my hot water cylinder, actually I can start combining everything. And I think as we're growing in our systems and our understanding of how we can communicate between different devices, we're seeing a real radical step change in the industry. Because we're able to integrate products with other products now, which we've not been able to do before at all. And then because of that, we're able to take advantage of lower tariffs or lower rates. And I think where capital, you've got the capital to do that. But I actually think, and all our work shows that when you replace a heat pump from a gas boiler, obviously the capital can be a bit higher, but with the new boiler upgrade scheme, and there's a lot of funding for social housing, the actual running costs are at worst equal what you see. Now, sometimes if you've got a heat pump system that isn't working really well, then it might be more than a gas boiler. But normally we say it's about the same. So we say, hey, if you've got a heat pump and you've got a gas boiler and you don't really do anything super efficient with your heat pump, then you've got about the same. But then if you start adding your tariff savings and you start bringing in other kind of running your heat pump or upgrading your radiator system, you can make it even cheaper. Not that you have to, but you can make it even cheaper. And I think it gives you the ability to do that. Do you spend now and save later, or do you save now and spend later?
It's a kind of critical decision point, isn't it? You actually, especially if you're in a position where your boiler's broken down, you're either committing yourself to something for the next 10 years that no doubt is going to increase in price, or you make a decision to commit to something that that you are going to benefit from electrification, from increased clean energy growth. And the minute you start adding things like storage and solar into the equation, it does start increasing the benefits.
I mean, without doubt, there's a real clear benefits from that. And I think, but you don't have to.
No.
And I think heat pumps work great in isolation, and they work great when you add the technology. I
was looking at the stats the other day. The MCS data dashboard's really interesting to see the kind of actual deployment and where things are going. Yeah. And I think it was like 1.3, so it was 1.3 million solar installs in the UK.
Yeah. Wow.
And then, and I think we'll put about 360, 380 heat pump. 280,000 heat pump installations. And, but when you actually start to look at some of the EPC data, you actually see there's a lot of, the majority of those heat pump installations are going into homes that already have solar.
That's right.
So it is quite interesting when you're over there too and see that there's probably a natural progression that the consumer is going on in their own decision making. And mainly driven by those kind of maybe quicker wins, lower capital cost. But I think a big part of it is them gaining interest in their energy usage as they start to transition through that. But from an ideals perspective, then obviously this is a big transition for you guys, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
From the world of boilers into heat pumps. But how many boilers do you know how many boilers you're manufacturing, shipping out every year?
Well, I'd say, so we do almost 500,000 boilers we ship a year. We're lucky enough to have the most popular boiler that's installed in the UK at the moment. And
that's the Ideal Logic?
The Logic, the Logic. And that comes in different guises. But that's, it's the most popular boiler. And so we're really proud of our position as number one, manufactured for the UK market. And the reason why the Logic boiler does so well, much like our cylinders over at Gledhill, where we also lead that market with the most popular cylinders, is because they're designed to be for the UK. So the Logic was the first boiler that could fit in a kitchen cupboard, an average UK kitchen cupboard. Gledhill's cylinders go in your average airing cupboard. So it's the small things that I think make a real difference, as well as ease of installation and reliability. I think we've got the best rating on Trustpilot of any boiler manufacturer at the moment. And that's because of our real commitment to after sales and to make sure that the products we sell, we back. And I think that's really important. So but from an ideal perspective with heat pumps, as the government has moved the legislation towards encouraging low carbon adoption, we really get it, and we're really on board with that. And we've been able to use all our experience in Europe to really help transition the company to be gas boilers and a heat pump company. I think we've invested, or we're investing somewhere around 60 million around our sites in the UK, and that's investing in new warehousing, because every 9 boilers you can get on a pallet, you can get half a heat pump system, well, at least a heat pump, and then another pallet full of cylinder. So you need bigger storage. We've invested in production lines, and we're going to start building heat pumps here in the UK. We're investing in new R&D facilities. In fact, I think we're going to be one of the only manufacturers in the UK who are hiring heat pump engineers at the moment, with a real vision to create heat pumps, much like we did with the Logic boiler, just for the UK, and all the benefits that comes with having UK engineers and expertise alongside our European counterparts, which hopefully brings the best of both worlds. And then the other thing we've invested in a lot is training. We saw before we moved to heat pumps, our training was really just for our gas engineers or our own internal guys. And we saw a real gap with heat pumps. So potentially training is an area that just needed a bit more help in from our customers. And so we started our Expert Academy and opened up a whole world of training for our customers and for our installers. And it's going so well, and really taking a hands-on approach to training and how you would really starting from the beginning with installing heat pumps all the way through to how to rebuild a heat pump almost to F-gas all the way through, and all of it's hands-on and all of it's applicable to really help our customers transition as well. So I think it's one thing for gas boiler manufacturers, hot water cylinders, to transition to heat pumps. But actually for our installers, it's also a massive move from spending decades fitting combi boilers to now we're having to think about three-port valves and flow thermostats and return thermostats, and being asked to do a lot more when it comes to heating or fitting heating and hot water systems. So we've really tried to adapt our training to accommodate that new scope of work for our installers.
And are you finding are installers kind of coming through in their droves, or is it a challenge to get the average gas engineer to transition into?
I think it all depends on the markets. So I think we break down the UK into three markets. And I think for us, this is probably the able to pay market, which is you and I. We're able to buy the social landlord market, where there's housing is sponsored often by the government or by a local housing authority, or new builds. And new builds have been really are kind of prepping up for it. So a lot of new build contractors are going, we need to know, and are getting involved in trial sites. Social landlord space is where we see the fastest adoption of heat pumps, and we continue to see that now. So a lot of contractors or who either work with councils or housing associations are really interested, because that's what they have to do. And then in the one-off space, it really depends. I think some plumbers are really busy fitting gas boilers and don't really have the time to kind of look above and work out what's coming next. And others have the space to do that. But I think everyone we speak to, whether they have been fitting gas boilers for 40 years or whether they are just getting into the industry now, are really interested in heat pumps.
And you see, are the training courses kind of getting filled, or are you encouraging installers to
we're really lucky that our training courses get filled as soon as we announce them. So we're really lucky from that side, and we're growing capacity across the country to be able to fulfill that requirement. We definitely appreciate the amount of the popularity of our courses.
I mean, it's absolutely fundamental, isn't it? You've got to be in a position, if we're going to get anywhere close to servicing the demand for heat pumps. And I think that's the thing. Sometimes we see some of the comments on this show, we hear some of the feedback, and we have people that say, nobody's interested in having heat pumps. We see the level of inquiries and interest that we get for heat pumps. We struggle to keep up with it. Yeah. And then and that's just one installer. So there'll be installers like us all over the UK that have those same capabilities, but maybe are very busy doing installations.
Yeah, absolutely.
We always feel bad that somebody inquires, and we say, look, with the best will in the world, it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks before we could get near you.
Yeah.
And so there's consumer demand. We're doing installations, and they're going in well, and the customers are happy.
Yeah.
So there's no issue with the product. So that there is an encouraging route there for installers to make that transition. But you say a lot of them are so busy doing their day-to-day job, they're actually encouraging them to take that time out from installing.
Yeah.
Essentially losing money for those couple of days to invest in the future, where they're not going to be busy fitting boilers.
Yeah.
How far into the future do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, the government's put some funding out. I mean, we started supplementing heat pump training courses before. I think the government thought about funding them, but there is now a lot of funding for heat pump training courses. So there's definitely been a push
And that's
from number 10.
Is that the funding as in it doesn't cost to come on the course?
So yeah, so it doesn't cost to come on the course, or it might cost a really small amount for really a wide range of certifications.
See, I just wonder when the time will come. Like, it feels to me like there has to be a time to come with heat pumps if we're going to really make this transition where, because even if the course is free,
Yeah.
Which is amazing, and there's not too many places you can go where you're going to get free training like that. But then for the engineers that need to come on that course, if they're not on site for a day, that's a day's labor, that's a day's earnings.
Yeah.
And if you're sole trader, self-employed, that's
But you have to do it on gas, right? So you have to do your ACS. So there is already, you're on ventage, you have to do that anyway. So I think the nature of being in our industry is that you need certification, and I, as a customer, want the installer to be certified, and there's a cost to that certification. That's time.
But it's the argument.
I think the problem with heat pumps is it's quite a lot of time, because you're often going from nothing to something. So we've been working really closely with an organisation called BPEC, which is one of the certification companies for training in the UK, about doing a lot of online training. So I want to know that the person who fits my heat pump is trained, and I want to know they're trained really well. But I also want them to be able to afford to be able to work, and taking loads of time off the tools is difficult. So one of the things we've really invested in Ideal is stuff like this, doing stuff remotely, and being able to do as much as we can in the evenings. So our installers, it is a tough couple of weeks where you do your day job, you come home. But I guess we all go through that in our careers, don't we? Where we have longer days and some shorter days. The idea is to try and remove as much of the barrier as we can as a manufacturer. So the installers can do it in the evening. And it's interactive, and we do it over Teams, and you're able to we green screen it so you can see all the components behind that you're working on, and you're able to interact with the trainer at the same time. So we're trying to do that to reduce the amount of time. I think we need to be honest that there is going to be time, but I also think that it's never been a better time to be a heat pump installer, and it never will be. Right now is a sweet spot for heat pump installers, because there's more demand than we have capacity for within the engineering world in the UK. It's never been a better time. So one might seem as though you're losing now by transitioning to heat pump training. The long-term benefit of that, both for your finances as well as for your ability to pick up more clients, has never been better than it is now. And I think that's what we would say. That's what we say everywhere we go, actually, is we completely understand why you'd keep your head down and just try and get more boilers in, because there's a massive demand for that. But at the same time, if you can just flex that space, it's never been a better time. And I, a homeowner, would really love. I also want my engineer to have those qualifications. So I think it could work really well for and everyone in the long term.
It's definitely. I definitely think. I wouldn't knock the training, but I think one bit that is an industry-wide issue is the consumer for the consumer to have a heat pump fitted, the engineer has to be trained, certified, qualified.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The manufacturer benefits from selling that an alternative piece of kit. Maybe they're being incentivized to do so as well by in terms of kind of the government push towards the technology.
Yeah.
But I always think of the coming from that background of fitting the technology.
Yeah.
Admittedly, I went straight into heat pumps, but I had plenty of friends and still do now who are heating engineers, and their argument is quite simple. It's saying the consumer wants it, but they can't get hold of somebody to fit it, so they're going to phone me to fit a boiler.
Yeah. Right.
Manufacturer wants me to buy their heat pump, but I can still buy a boiler.
Yeah.
It's like, so unless somebody comes and picks me up and says, you're going to pay me the same day rate to come on that training as I would get my hands dirty doing that boiler, then I don't see why I should. Because it's kind of like, I've got to fit it, but I've got to go on the training. If that installer, the two installers that I've seen that have gone through to doing the training, you have the ones that are leaders, innovators.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe from an engineering perspective, have that drive for learning.
Yeah.
Because it's a task and a quest to them.
It is, yeah.
But then you also have engineers that are like, to be honest, I'm not that busy and I could really do with some extra stuff. So rather than me sitting at home all day twiddling my thumbs, I'm going to go on that funded course.
Right. Yeah.
But this mass market of engineers that sit in the middle that are getting up every day and they've got plenty of work on.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, I mean, I think I've seen something come out saying there's going to be 10 million boilers fitted between 2025 and 2035.
Yeah.
That's still, I mean, we're 1.7 million a year now. So we're kind of like saying if we're 8 million down from where we would be if we carried on doing what we're doing now, there's still a huge ton of boilers to go in. So what are we saying to those installers? Because this is crucial to the deployment, isn't it? Because if we don't get engineers sat there going, you can have this, but here's a better option for you. If you're not certified, if you're not trained, that second
you're going to sell the boiler, aren't you?
You're going to push the boiler. How do we get them off the street and into the training centres?
I think it's a really good shout. For me, I think customer demand is king in that. So I think the way that my plumber is going to move to heat pumps if I ask him for a heat pump, and if my neighbour asks him for a heat pump, and if my neighbour's neighbour asks him for a heat pump. And so therefore I think customer drive is a key aspect of selling appliances. I don't think it's fair for us to tell Mrs. Smith she has to have a heat pump. I think she should still have the option. And therefore for Mrs. Smith, she needs to have a boiler if she wants a boiler. I think my expectation is over the next few years, we're going to see a move to heat pumps because they make more sense. And I think the more people understand that they can trust the technology, which they absolutely can, and actually see some real benefits financially as well, then it becomes the plumber's job to fulfill the requirement of the customer. And I think that's where we'll see the most movement. But I also think we need to remember that we have the most homogeneous heating systems of any country, probably in Europe. And therefore it's going to take a bit of time for us to move this 80% of boilers to boilers and heat pumps and panel rads and other technologies. And I think that's one of the things we need to be careful. I think if we go too quick, but there has to be, as long as we've got boilers, we're going to need to make sure people can fit them, people can fix them, people can install them. As long as we've got natural gas for that. And I think that's one of the big things for Ideal, is that actually looking after products, it's not just selling a product, but looking after a product is also a really important aspect of our industry.
Huge. And I think that, as you say, that consumer demand is key. I remember, we were doing training and support for installers in the kind of solar boom time, back end of 2011, 2012. And, and that was driven by consumer demand. Okay, there was a bit of a upheaval towards the end, but ultimately that was consumer demand. And I think where we've seen it with engineers that maybe aren't making this transition, but customers are starting to get aware, especially if they're in this kind of world of, they've got solar, maybe they've got battery, they're starting to look at Octopus Flex and Eon Next and those kind of flexible tariffs. But what's happening is, and we've actually got an amazing customer. They're coming on the show in a few weeks. A lady called Deborah Jones who went through this journey.
Cool.
Who, had solar, had battery, wanted a sun amp, a thermal battery, hot water battery fitted in the home. We said, had you considered having a heat pump as part of the installation? Because the sun amps, they were about £3,500, £4,000 fitted with VAT and what have you.
Yeah.
And but obviously, if you do it as part of a heat pump installation, it's zero VAT. So we said, and then you get the boiler upgrade scheme grant. So we actually said, look, you can have a sun amp and a heat pump fitted for pretty much the same price.
Right. Yeah.
And she's completely, now the installation's in, she's just coming out through the winter now, but really, really pleased with it. Mega efficiency.
Yeah,
we did the installation there, but crucially, we got a phone call from the plumber, or the heating engineer for that job, actually phoned us up was saying, what the hell are you playing at?
Yeah.
This is this won't work. It's not suitable or whatever.
Wow.
So we had to convince him.
That's
first.
that's a really good plumber that he's willing to do that on behalf of his customer,
but that's
even
the
though
thing.
slightly uninformed.
Yeah,
really
but genuinely
good.
thought that was
Yeah.
the case. Genuinely was like, we're misselling. We're like, no, we've done the calculations.
Yeah,
to tell,
right.
and obviously they're happy now. But that was, so first off, he was absolutely adamant that this thing wasn't going to work. So from whatever research he'd done. But secondly, he'd serviced that boiler for years.
Yeah.
So he's now lost that customer. And I think, as you say, if consumer demand builds, but then if the neighbour of Deborah in that case decides to go for a heat pump and the same installer turns up and says, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And then, I know it works because next door I've got one.
Exactly the same with combi boilers. Exactly the same when combi boilers first came out. Everyone was like, they're never going to work. Yeah. And now everyone has a combi boiler. The same with gas. I'm sure when people move from oil and coal to gas, there was the same conversation about these are never going to work. And I think technology, the irony of heat pumps is it's not a new technology. No. So I think this is where we get confused the country. So combi boilers were new technology, system boilers, condensing boilers, all of that was new when it landed, but heat pumps aren't new. This has been an industrialized product. We manufacture between 100 and 130,000 heat pumps a year. Like it's, and we could do more. So we're just starting obviously new factories in Hull and also in France. So I think that's the irony of heat pumps. They do work. And I think for installers, I also think it's been a tough run because often with heat pumps, training wise, you'd either go to a hotel because someone would take a room in a hotel. I don't know where you did yours, but I went to one and it was in the back end of, I've been to a train with, before Ideal, with a few different heat pump manufacturers, and it would just be really average, the experience. And either it would be in the back corner of somewhere or it wouldn't really be and it'd be theoretical. I couldn't get my hands on anything. And you'd leave going, okay, I've got a ticket to say I can do this, but actually I'm going to learn on my first install.
Yeah.
It's like you learn to drive and then you learn to drive. And I think in the same way, that's been a real change for us. We've definitely recognized that. So for instance, we saw the F-gas course, which is the refrigerant course. So it enables you to work with the engine of the product. And we were like, how do we create a space? How do we change that training so you still get the accreditation, but you can actually lean into the F-gas on a heat pump rather than on a fridge freezer or an air conditioning unit, which is the only other way you can train in F-gas. So we were like, well, we can't train our engineers on a heat pump, an air conditioning unit or a fridge, because firstly, we don't sell either of those, but also the application is for a heat pump. So we went to Sitting Guilds and we created our own F-gas training, which is certified by Sitting Guilds now. I think we're the only manufacturer to have done that. So we can give our engineers that end-to-end experience all the way through, which means if you've got a problem on a mid-terrace with a heat pump that weighs 120 kg and you can't get it through the door, actually, we have our engineers and our customers, our installers are able to go and fix it in situ rather than kind of write it off or expect it to be replaced.
Yeah.
And I guess that's just leaning into that post-sales aspect of heat pump installations is probably one of the most important things and probably the thing we don't talk about enough in the heat pump world, I think. Because if you look at the moment, if you look at, say, for instance, my car, if something goes wrong with my car in 2 years' time, I'll take it to the dealer and they will fix it without an issue. With boilers, manufacturers come to your house and fix it if it's under warranty. But with heat pumps, they've often been sold really well, but once they're in the house, you don't often have the same level of service that you might get. And that's because putting engineers on the road and paying for customer service is expensive. And for a lot of heat pump manufacturers, that's not been a priority for them. I think one of the key things at Ideal, since we've really started to bring heat pumps into the UK and starting to sell heat pumps and obviously now developing manufacturing and R&D, but we want to really back our products. So you've made a massive investment, and for some people it can be tens of thousands invested in a heat pump, and then they fitted it and something goes wrong and they try and call a call centre and they can't get through. There is no call centre. They get directed to the local installer who's already on another job fitting other heat pumps. It doesn't have quite the time to be able to get back and have a look, or there's a component problem and they have to call someone and it's, we'll ship it in 2 weeks. And Mrs. Smith, who's just invested a lot of money, is sat with a product that in principle works really well, but doesn't know how to fix it and can't call anyone. So when we launched our heat pumps into the Logic Air on monoblock, we launched with the biggest customer service team. We have a customer service office open 364 days a year. So you've got a problem, and apart from Christmas Day, I mean, our customer service director always likes the idea of Christmas Day, but apart from Christmas Day, we will be able to receive a call, and everyone's based around the factory. So we've got R&D and training and loads of resource to support those guys who answer the phone. And most of the time for us, we can get engineers on the phone so they can speak through to Mrs. Smith and say, oh, actually, you just switched your stat off. Why don't you just turn it back on again? Or we can dial into the product. But we also have 200 engineers on the road every day with parts vans. They've been trained in Ideal. In fact, our CEO's daughter is one of those engineers. And if you want to take some heat from product management, you want to create a product which your CEO's daughter can service well. But I think that's really amazing. Where we are. And all of our engineers who work on heat pumps are able to rebuild the heat pump from scratch. And we have R&D involved, which means that, and the whole reason for that is so that my mum, if she gets a heat pump and it goes wrong and she's made a massive investment, she can trust that there's a company who are going to support her really quickly, and they're going to be able to speak to her on the day, and they're going to be able to send an engineer if there's a problem. And rather than relying on third-party people or people who maybe financially need to have a compelling reason to go, actually, as a manufacturer, we are going to look after the products. So not only do we think we've just launched the Logic Air monoblock, which is we launched it last year, our flagship product, which is one of the quietest, the most efficient products on the market, the easiest to fit, because obviously a lot of our installers are gas fitters. But we've got a thermostat, Halo Air, which works really well with heat pumps and actually makes a bespoke heating system for every heat pump that goes in. So if your commission engineer gets it slightly wrong, Halo Air will automatically make it more efficient while hitting target temperature. But the big thing for all of us is, how do we back our products? And that is, we invest heavily in customer service and after-sales support. So if it goes wrong, we're there, which means you're not left with 10 grand of equipment which you don't know how to work. You're left with 10 grand of equipment which is going to work really well. And if it doesn't, we're there to help.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a big, it's a compelling story for the consumer, because if we do go down this route where consumer demand
absolutely
picks up, and ultimately that is sending the installers down on that journey. I think a crucial part of that is going to be that if maybe at the moment, I can't imagine boiler installers are getting that many
heat pump inquiries.
They're getting that many consumers specifying the boiler. You know, my boiler's broken. Can you come and replace it? I would imagine that is the majority of the cases.
Yeah. And replace it with the one I had before.
Yeah, but I wonder how many times the consumer even says, "Oh, can I have exactly the same one as I had before?" Or will it just be that the installer automatically says, if I can get exactly the same one as before, I will, because it's going to be easy to fit."
Yeah.
Whereas I think in this new world where there's those kind of support solutions in place, and who knows, that installer who fits it might not be there in a year's time, not due to maybe running his or her business badly, but could be purely down, could get hit by a bus tomorrow. So maybe the customer starts saying, I want an Ideal boiler.
Yeah.
Or I want an Ideal heat pump, or I want a Vaillant heat pump, because of that support, because of that.
I think it's crucial. And actually, it's how we've been running the boiler market for ages. There's an expectation in the boiler market that you will have, that manufacturers like Ideal will send an engineer to look after that boiler if it's in warranty. But that's really unique to the UK. Around Europe and Middle East, Far East, that's not often, it's left to third-party contractors. So I completely understand why some manufacturers who aren't as familiar with the UK might not put that in place. But for us, it's really crucial. And I think for me, it's crucial because I want to know that people who buy our products have not only enjoy having it, not only have a product works really well and better than, or as good at least, but better than most others. But I want to know that they're going to have peace of mind that when they fit it. And the other thing for me is, as we transition installers, they're going to get it wrong. Like, we get it wrong. Whenever I do something new, it takes me some time to get it right, really right every time. And the last thing we want to do is for our installers to have this pressure that when they get it wrong, they have to, they can't be really open and honest with that. But if they know actually there's a manufacturer who I can call and there's an engineer who lives not far away who can help, then I think for our installers, there's also peace of mind that when you fit manufacturers like Ideal who are willing to back the product that actually are also going to help them transition. Because there's nothing better than getting it wrong and someone showing me how to get it right.
And do you do anything of that kind of, installations gone in last day, ready for commissioning? Do you guys?
So we happily, so commissioning support is something we do for a lot of our customers, a lot of our installers who maybe aren't familiar or doing the first few installs and just kind of actually had a really good training session. I fitted one, but what do I do with that? Then actually, if they can't call, we can definitely support from that side. And I think it's crucial. We need to make sure when Mrs. Smith buys a heat pump, she knows it's going to be supported by a significant manufacturer. We need to know from the installer when he fits one that he's not going to be left on. I used to hate it on a Friday afternoon. It was always a Friday afternoon, and we'd find a problem with a dip switch, and you just call up the manufacturer and you go, no one's there to help. I've got to help them understand how to fix this. That goes away with Ideal, because you call up and there's someone there, and if we can't, we can get someone there. And I think that's the only way people are going to start trusting heat pump technology.
Well, it starts blending it through, doesn't it? You go from there, you're supporting the installers, so the installers have that umbrella, that kind of comfort blanket, safety blanket as they transition through. And then, as you say, naturally what happens is, the mistakes are learned. The things are figured out, and then maybe the next batch coming in need that more of that support. But those installers are on doing the good job.
It's an investment for us, because we know if we can get that installer working well, then actually that installer isn't going to need us next time.
And you've got the installers. I mean, how many boiler installs do you have?
Yeah, we have a lot of boiler installers. So 500,000 boilers a year means we have a lot of boiler installers. And exactly. And if they're not familiar with heat pumps, there's or they don't want to do MCS, for instance, there's companies like HPIN who will help them transition to that as well. So, and we work alongside HPIN, and so trying to take away some of maybe the bureaucracy of becoming a heat pump installer. Sometimes it's not actually fitting the pipes or wiring the cables. It's also the office side. How do you look at that? And so one of the things that we're really excited for, right, the HPIN model, and we've seen a lot of our installers. In fact, I was over the back end of the summer, I was speaking to one of our installers at a trade event, and he said, Andy, I'm going to fit one of your Logic Airs next week. And I was like, really? Have you been through our training? He's like, yeah, actually, but it was through HPIN. I found out about it, and I was like, brilliant. That's worked really well. And it means for him, he's been able to go through the training, understand how to fit a heat pump without the overheads, but then transition into, if he wants to get MCS, then brilliant. And if he wants to stay where he is, brilliant. Go back to fitting gas boilers and heat pumps without the overheads. He can do that as well. So I think trying to, and with the knowledge that if it all goes wrong, Ideal are there.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're going to be there, and we've got the infrastructure and the support to make sure that you're going to be okay, whether you're installing it or whether you're using it.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, isn't it?
Yeah,
it really is.
I'm looking forward to getting our hands on one and seeing one ourselves.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Yeah, I think and we've done this thing with our thermostats, which is just, I can't tell you how good it is. And it's really difficult because I work for Ideal and I'm not in sales, believe it or not. But when you see a product that you know is brilliant, you can't help but get behind it. And I think whether it's the Logic Air heat pump or the pre-plumb cylinder, which is the fastest, or one of the fastest heat recoveries on the market, low pressure loss, because the guys at Gledhill made this really good heat exchange. I know it's too technical, so apologies for that. But the thermostat is like a boiler thermostat to use. It's almost exactly the same. It links to app on my phone. It's really good, but it is able to effectively make the heat pump deliver every time as efficiently as possible. And it has room influence, and it's connected, and it's wireless, and it looks cool. So yeah, I'm excited for you to see some of it.
Yeah, I'm going to say Terry and Jay will put it through its paces.
Yeah, and I'm excited for them to fit it as well, because it should save them some time. So they'll be able to have an extra day off a week. You guys will be able to charge your customers a bit less. And you've got the fact that we fitted most of it for you in the factory. So as long as you find space for it.
I like the sound of it.
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you very much.